Welcome once again, everyone, to 123 Chess, the place where we review, analyze, and improve. My name is Luke.
And I'm Tom.
And as you can imagine, today we are going to go over the analysis portion of our game 2. So in this one, unlike last week, we're actually going to dig into things that were from external sources above us, so that we can glean true wisdom on how to proceed with the kinds of things we encountered in this game going forward. So without any further delay, let's go ahead and begin this process. I'm going to go ahead and start with my 3 moves that I chose to analyze and playing as white. So just as a refresher, this game began with a queen pawn followed by queen's gambit, and then this was the opening right here of the Albin Countergambit that Tom threw at me. And so as things progress, we get to this point, struggle for control of the middle, center control remains, and this right here is the part where it deviated from Grandmaster games that we saw. Both Tom and I mentioned in our last video that this move is what we both agree was probably something that was a little premature. So with that in mind, what I did is I looked at this position before it and I said, okay, what if this pawn did not move here? Just what if? Because more than likely in the future, that's what I'm going to encounter, especially if we play higher level players or even each other again, now that we know what we know. So let's take a look, shall we? First of all, what did he have as an option? Well, this move right here with bishop g4. Now, obviously, I haven't looked at Tom's analysis, but for me personally, this is definitely one of the most solid moves that I found. I also checked it again after I was done against the chess engine. This definitely is one of the better moves. So what does this accomplish? It's pinning my knight to my queen. Keep in mind, he already has the other knight pinned to my king, with the intention of eventually advancing this to push my knight. And then you have all the center attacks going on already. So then after this, the question is, what are my options? What are the things that I should have done in response to this position? Well, one thing I could have done is I could have simply attacked the center pawn. Now that's something I was wanting to do for quite a while, but the question is of timing. With doing it at this point, the problem is this, as you can see, this opens up the line directly toward my queen. And with 2 pinned pieces here, this is a brutal position for me to deal with. I now have a hanging pawn, which he's going to take. Obviously, I am a pawn up, but then we have also this. He can castle, bringing his rook into the game as well. So there's a lot about this position that I don't really like, because it's just way too much to try to defend. And usually the idea is, if you're behind in development and behind in position, you don't want to open up the game like this. And so by me doing that right now, I'm almost inviting Tom to just slam into my territory all the more. So this was one I did not care for so much. I mean, I could go through a lot of what I could have done to circumvent what he would throw at me. But case in point, this is not probably my best option. So then I looked at, okay, what other options could I have done? I ended up landing on bishop e2, and I'll tell you why. No matter which of these other things I did, no matter how you look at it, eventually bishop e2 would have become a really crucial move to do. But unlike in the other situations, such as if I had taken his pawn, or instead if I had moved my bishop to d2, either way, by doing it right now, I'm kind of maintaining the initiative, if you get what I'm saying. So like, really, instead of just reacting to everything Tom's thrown at me, I already have a game plan. If this pawn pushes, then my knight's going to go here. Okay, and then if he takes this, well, he's just relieving the pressure he has on me, and then I'll just take it with my pawn. If he takes here, well, then I'm more than happy to kind of, throw the other pieces at it and kind of get that cleared off. And, so there's not really any real true threats that are on me at this point. So of all of the options that I saw, I really liked that. Now you can say, okay, Luke, well, what if he goes like this? And then, and then I go here, then he pushes this. There's a lot of these things that could happen, but no matter how you look at it, my defense and my position is very solid if I'm just prudently moving that there to allow myself to castle. He's got a queenside castle ready. I got a kingside castle ready. And as soon as that kingside castle comes in, you guessed it, this knight is getting ready to aim at his queen, so he's probably going to want to take it. Okay, so that was my first position. Again, I went really in depth. I don't want to go through all the millions of words of what I was thinking, but I went through all of the options. Tom also could have, instead of playing the bishop, he also could have played the knight. And then he could have retreated the queen back a little. There's a lot of different things he could have done. He could have even moved the queen over here. But either way, knowing Tom's playing style, as well as what the strong options were from the chess engine and other masters, I think that was probably the best bet for him. So now let's look at my second one. Okay, so we all know this is where the kind of one blunder happened. So I took this pawn. Then the question is, after he moves his knight right to this spot, the question is, then what? That is the question I asked myself during the game. The problem is I didn't take enough time to actually assess the position and really calculate my options. Keep in mind, I have a pin on his queen. I also, this bishop, if he moves the knight, he can't castle. Now, by him moving the knight there, it's blocking it, so he will be able to castle. But then I'll have a pin onto his rook. So, case in point, my two bishops and my queen are extremely strong. But the question is, how do I capitalize on it? Now, there's a lot of things I could do, but one blatantly obvious thing, and it's not what we had said when we had mentioned during the game that, oh, well, can't we just, go ahead and, take the knight? Yeah, I could do that and it wouldn't be bad, but there's something super obvious. And the reason why it's obvious is Tom hasn't castled yet. His king is in a very weak spot. So let's look at what could have happened. Boom. So by the bishop taking that knight, obviously there's only two pieces that can take the bishop. And if he takes it with the queen, well, then I have a fork on his king and rook. So I'm going to take a rook. But if he takes it with the king, which is probably the better of the two options, now, it's just, there's nothing good here that can come of this. And actually, you know what, now that I look at it again, it's not really the better. The point is, as you can see, this is just wreaking havoc on his whole defense. So by the simple, if I would have just simply calculated, like, what if I take this knight? Okay, boom, boom. Okay, now what if I take this knight? And if I did that, I would have seen that this is a very simple idea that could be capitalized on. So again, let's go through. If I took the knight, okay, and then he takes it with one of his pieces. Boom, move back there. Take that. I mean, there's a lot of good options he had, but at the end of the day, he's going to be at least a major for minor piece behind, and at best, I'm going to have way more going for me. I mean, there's just so many tactical options, and just keep in mind too, I have a rook that I can bring in. I have a knight that can be brought in. There's a lot here, and this game would have gone a lot faster. Tom, did you want to add anything? Did you see?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really look at this position, but if you want to back up to where it was.
Yeah. Where do you want me to go to?
The original starting point. Yeah, I was wondering if you had explored as a viable option, perhaps C4. I guess
C4?
I'm going to castle next move regardless, and if I castle, that breaks things up. So maybe that's an error.
Yeah, no, that isn't bad. It's just that what I learned, and again, I'll come back to this for my key takeaways, but regarding pins in particular, of all tactics, pins are one that you have to know how to capitalize on it swiftly, or you'll lose the opportunity. And so
Makes sense.
here, the second you castled, the second that happened, my opportunity for my best option was gone. And that's all because the king was in a weak position.
That makes sense.
But yeah, so this was one that, again, it really is simple calculation. But, Tom and I both thought, I thought when I looked at this before, I mean, I figured I could take the knight on c6, but I didn't realize what obvious thing was there that was much more powerful, that would have really done damage and would have made the game a lot swifter for me. So anyway, that's my second one. Now, as we keep going through this web of interesting moves, I did mention briefly that this one, I was kind of like, what do I do with my knight? One thing I did find is that pushing this pawn earlier would have been a wise idea. It would have just relieved my knight and rook from being stuck guarding there. And also, I mean, why not? If Tom goes here, there we go. I mean, there's nothing bad about that. So that's one thing that I also had going for me. But I want to take it all the way to the end game. This is where we traded. And I think, Tom, you mentioned this. I can't remember if this was your move or one of them. But right here, okay. I just want to briefly mention a few things. So this also it's not anything complicated, but as far as right here, why didn't I move this pawn first? This was a key square that Tom could get to try to get into my zone, so to speak. So I feel like if I could rewind, I would have probably moved there. Even though getting my king into play is wise, it's still it's about the crucial squares at this point. So I think I probably would have gone there. Then if we take it a little bit further, and we see that this. Okay, so right here, now I have a passed pawn. Okay, and I mentioned this in our last video, and Tom also pointed out my F pawn is kind of backward too much. But once we get to this point, and then he goes back there, I mentioned, why don't I just go for this other pawn here? So a lot of these things, if I had taken more time to actually look at my options, I would have seen very clearly that it's just a matter of more forcing moves than I was doing. I think that could be said of pretty much the whole game, honestly. Forcing moves and power moves are really what controls the tempo and the flow and the initiative of the game. So that was pretty much my biggest takeaway. So I analyzed a bunch of stuff. I'm not going to go into it, but I just realized that I just need to take more time on my clock, look at my options, and just look for the forcing move that can force my hand into the way I want it to be. Yeah, so that was mine.
Cool. All right, pull up mine here. I'm gonna flip the board since I was black. All right, so I see the Queen's Gambit responding to Albin. I'm not there threatening. And then it was that pawn move there. That's the first one that I really looked at too. And so I looked at capture. Yeah, I did look at the capture actually. So instead of advancing forward, Luke, I do think that this move is nice. And you will see that in my sequence here. But I said, what if I had taken that pawn there first? Because now I'm threatening that knight can no longer move.
Yep.
Because of the pin that's happening with the bishop.
That's good.
And so as a result, we're going to get some trades that are happening. It could go, it could be capture with the knight is available, or that pawn. If the knight moves out there, I don't know. It's still got a lot of pressure. I got my knight here, right? So we could end up seeing a lot of exchanges happening in the middle there. I said pawn takes is what I ended up going with. And then after pawn takes, then I explored that option of that pin. And just being here, and honestly, this position isn't a heck of a lot different than this position here. I think in general, we're both kind of accomplishing that same theme of keeping that pressure up.
Yeah.
I kind of do like that one better. I like the threat of the castle here. But I took it down just a little bit of an exploration into what that move. I obviously identified that same move for Luke, right? Pulling that bishop up to defend, which eventually get a trade off. And then just as an additional line, the idea of being able to stop castling by bringing queen up and keeping that pressure on. But I think in the end, like I really identified the same thing as Luke of keeping the pressure on with the F, even when there. So yeah, I'm definitely in agreement on that one. Moving on. Let's see here. I think a big part of that is just I have a tendency to really swing for the fences, and I think that was Luke has talked about keeping tension up. For me, a lot of it is slowing my game down. I mean, just from a perspective of like, is that piece thoroughly defended? That's one of the concepts that I focused on a lot on this last week, is making sure my pieces are fully defended as I'm placing them. And if I'm just looking at where that pawn is, it's already being attacked, right? I mean, not well, because the piece that it's being attacked by is currently pinned, right? But the only piece that's actually defending it up there is that queen. And to think about that queen as like, that's a permanent spot for my queen, it's not. That's not a permanent spot for my queen, because that queen currently is not being defended by anything. That queen is entirely hanging. So, you know, pushing it at that point in time is really going out on a limb, whereas this solidifies my position level.
Also, if I could interject real quick, you mentioned like I could also have taken the d4 pawn with my knight if you had gone e takes d4 instead of the bishop there. And that's just looking at that and knowing what I would have done. That's exactly what I would have done.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know here. The thing is at this point in time, I might actually go for just a heavy piece exchange, because if I'm doing something like that, you know, I can clear a lot off. Probably don't want to take that knight quite yet. But even something like that, I've built up a pretty solid defense in the middle there, and I've prepped myself for castling, whereas that isn't yet.
Yeah.
This could go in a lot of places, right, at this point in time.
Yeah, it's a very tactical setup.
It is, and I think that's a lot of what I end up trying to go for when playing against Luke a lot, and against a lot of players, is I'm trying to get those tactical moves down. Again, even in something like this, I'm really prepping that move, and I haven't moved my minor pieces more than once. I'm still protecting. I'm protecting all of my pieces. I'm not leaving my pieces hanging. Obviously, this is, you know, these are my weak pieces currently. But Luke's going to want to get this this bishop developed even at this point in time, right? Because he wants to castle as well.
Yep.
And that's what I was missing this game, was early castle in, keeping that pressure on, going down the center.
Exactly.
So we went on here. Okay, so this was my next one that I was looking at here. Because this is what I did. And this is where my blunder happened, right? Where I brought that forward, not seeing that if he takes with his bishop, which he did, I cannot retake with my pawn because that opens up the line of attack onto the rook. So I said, okay, what if I didn't do that? Then interestingly, the move that seems obvious to me is prepping the move that I did before, right? I did this in our game, but it was sort of an order of operations thing. This is when I should have been doing it. Okay, I've got all this pressure mounting up on my queen side, right? And as I'm getting this pressure mounting up on my queen side, I need to take a moment to defend, which seems obvious when you're playing as the black player, especially, right? Defend. You got to defend. And that would have been a very defensive move. I said at that point in time, we might have seen a castle out of Luke. And
yeah.
That's really what I was prepping for there, was castling myself.
Yep. Yeah, this is very, very much a position that could have happened if you hadn't done that.
Yeah, and then I just brought it back to this, right? Bringing your bishop out, like increasing that that line of attack, which is kind of what you were doing, right? That theme that you were getting. But I said now is when that move is no longer a bad move. Now I am prepping. Oops, now I am prepping and I am threatening that, and that is now a legitimate threat.
Yes.
And so now I'm getting the desired result. So I thought that was kind of my takeaway there, and which again, I don't know how much we've said this on camera. We've certainly said this before the camera started. Order of operations. It is so darn important. Like recognizing that is a good attack move.
Yep.
That's a step. Like, yeah, that's a good way to start launching an attack, because I'm recognizing that there's a potential pin there. But you can't go out guns a-blazing every single time. You can't just attack. You have to make sure that your pieces are secured. And again, going back to kind of what I was saying in terms of making that assessment, and this was a huge focus for me in my own personal studies this last week, is a really fundamental chess concept, which is don't leave your pieces hanging. Recognize what pieces do you have on the board at any given time that aren't defended by anything. Because just, a quick cursory glance, boom, those pieces right there have no other pieces that are defending them right now.
Yep.
And if I'm paying attention to that, then doing something like this, that does nothing. That is nothing to help take care of those pieces. I've just let them sit there, which is especially dangerous just considering like how much pressure is already on this side. So just taking a moment to help secure, and that move right there obviously doesn't defend this piece or this piece, right? But it is a transition move to get to the castle, which at this point in time clears up that problem, and it clears up that problem.
Yeah.
leaving me that one. That one is the only one left. Which that that move that we talked about there takes that that weakness that I have and turns it into a strength, because now that's a pawn that I can launch forward to get that attack out.
Yeah, totally.
And then the next one that I looked at was this one here. So this is what I did in our game, and I looked at this, and it was interesting that Luke and I both saw that this was a potential move, because the capture happens like this, and now I've doubled up those pawns. What I thought was very interesting was when I looked at it, the chess engine said that taking there was actually an inaccuracy. Now, it did not suggest doing the move that I did either. It suggested this rook come out to b8.
Nice. I like
that. Yeah, I like that a lot. And if I'm just looking at the position, right, I haven't necessarily taken that away as a threat. So he's going to have to do something about that still. But what I've really done by moving that rook to b8 is I've claimed stake to the b file, which I didn't do this game. If we look at the way the game actually progressed, who gets the b file? Luke gets it. And if you're looking at that position, it's a pretty pivotal file, because it is the only open file on the board right now.
Yeah.
Setup. So I thought that was very interesting.
That's super interesting.
So again, taking care of that so the pawns don't get doubled up. That's the move that Luke actually did. And then the recommendation goes into this, putting pressure on there, which I love this move too, because he doesn't want to capture, obviously, because if he captures, then I get to bring this pawn over, and now I've connected those two pawns.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's good stuff, man.
Yeah, I really love that one. And so that's more of a position that we're looking at there. Which, obviously white is still winning in this position, but it's certainly a lot stronger than the position that I was in.
Yeah, sure is.
Yeah, so those were my key takeaways. That's what I really looked at. Yeah, name of the game for me was defending, really defending those, making sure all of my pieces are defended, and restraining myself from just launching into an early attack, an early unfounded attack.
Nice. And my key takeaways were, first off, we mentioned last video about once we get to the Albin Countergambit, Tom had mentioned how if I were to take here instead, that is the main line. So that's what you'll see most of the time, especially in the higher level players. And what I did not realize is that after we finished these analyses, that choice that I made to go here instead was, I want to say 90% of my problems in the opening were because I did that. And if you look at statistics, it is overwhelmingly worse win percent of white in this position from the other one. And there's others too, but I'm just pointing out the main line.
And I want to go over that. This is, something that's definitely findable online. Luke said that he was worried about a trap that can happen from this position.
Mm-hmm.
The trap, though, just so we show it.
Yeah, go for it.
It really only occurs when this move happens.
Yep.
And that move, like, it seems okay. because you're thinking, right, the logic is, well, I want to take that back, right? And if I capture there, maybe I can capture with my bishop, right? So it looks okay, but this is where it starts.
Mm-hmm. It's beautiful when it works. It like almost never does, but
yeah. And this is okay. Well, defend, right? And then the pawn takes. Well, the bishop can't take now because this bishop is here pinning that.
mm-hmm.
So the obvious choice is, well, this bishop is undefended, so take the bishop. But at this point in time, the pawn just keeps going, and now that's check.
Mm-hmm.
And when the check happens, the king can't take, because if the king takes, you lose a queen.
And Tom, do you remember when I posted this on Facebook? I think it was a long time ago. I actually had the privilege of doing this one time.
Did you?
I literally did. In an actual game, someone literally fell for all of what he just showed you guys.
Yeah,
and
it is a really neat trap. Go ahead.
It was so rewarding to be able to memorize that. But case in point, it's like hardly ever done. So so that's a good, I'm glad, Tom, that you brought this up, and thanks for showing it, because I think you were spot on with what you pointed out, and that is I was scared for something that almost nobody would do. Like if I didn't move the one pawn, if I didn't move my e pawn to e3 at that moment, it wouldn't have been a thing. So like, why was the point here I'm trying to make is, for those of us who don't know much about opening theory yet and are at our level of play, we get too hung up on our emotional responses to things that we feel uncomfortable because of one little thing we're scared of or we know. But is that really a threat? I mean, is that a legitimate problem, or is that just something that you just have to be careful about? I mean,
well, and so then just to finish up this line, because this attack is amazing. I love this attack, right? At this point in time, the king can't recapture the pawn, and it can't move here because of the queen, because of my black queen. So it only has one move, and it's moving there. And my favorite part about this entire line is when
promoting to a knight.
To a knight. It's so cool.
Taking away that F3 spot.
Yep. Yeah, it's really neat.
Yep. Yeah, no, thanks for bringing that up. I think that was helpful for our viewers to see that trap. Is it called the Lasker trap or something like that?
Yeah, Lasker trap. Yep.
Lasker trap. Yeah. So, but I used to, I mean, since I was able to play it on someone, the point was I spent time trying to learn all those traps. And while they're great, if I had spent that time on actually opening theory, I'd probably be a stronger player today. So I think this is, to me, just a resounding reminder of, I need to really, if I looked at this opening theory, the Albin Countergambit, what's the idea with the Albin? Can I go back here real quick? So the whole idea with the Albin Countergambit is for the black player to advance the pawn in the d file, because it's a great position. It blocks this square from my knight advancing. So it just makes it awkward for me. But after I looked at a grandmaster going over this, reviewed it in multiple places, and found that the compensation for white allowing that passed pawn or the advanced pawn in the d file is actually more than sufficient. You just have to know how the theory works, and you have to know where the pieces want to go in this kind of setup. And as long as you have a solid basic understanding of that, it's more than playable for both teams.
Yeah, and a really solid move here.
Mm-hmm. That's standard.
I mean, and that's the thing. Like, I mean, you're gonna go in. We could go over the main line that it goes into, but I mean, just from there, like,
very playable.
You're gonna have a good game from going there. Just for the last trap, you'll be fine. Don't move.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, no, thanks for bringing that up, Tom. Yeah, so for me, that was my first key takeaway, is just understanding that probably in the future, at least for now, I think I'm probably going to stick with D takes E5 instead of C takes D5. And then also my second point is, it's a funny one because I didn't think this about myself, but this just goes to show you how inaccurate our assessment of ourselves can be at this level. I thought I was pretty decent at pins. Nope. I went through, I don't know if you can see it, if it probably flips the angle, but so this is, we already mentioned this in our first video, but Chess Tactics for Champions by Susan Polgar, Grandmaster. I went through she has a chapter on a lot of the basic tactics. I went through all of the puzzles on pins. And before that, I have to say, I went through the puzzles on the forks and double tacks. I was done with those very quickly, and I got an A on it. I mean, I did a good job. I got to the pin section. It was so hard for me. I kid you not. They should be so basic, but knowing it's the order of operations, like Tom mentioned earlier, and like I was pointing out, like knowing which to do, how do you capitalize on a pin? You got to do it fast. You got to do it right away, but you have to know the order of the movement and how to use that pin for your advantage as a tool. And so if you don't do that in the proper order, you're either A, going to just equalize the position, or B, you could get yourself into trouble. Or maybe C, it's not even a threat, like you don't have an option for a threat. But the point is, I need to be able to more swiftly, as I'm playing a game, like recognize, visualize that position and see what my options are. So that was a huge thing for me to realize. And then my third one is nothing new. It's just calculations of the end game and how if I just took more time to go over those, especially king pawn end games, I would be much more solid in my play. I know more about the end games than my games demonstrate, and it's because I don't take the time to look through it and to really assess. So I think both of us, one of our big themes in this whole game 2 that we went over is really like the pieces hanging that Tom mentioned, and then taking our time, really assessing things, taking a good look. Don't storm in and don't do things prematurely. It's a really good lesson in patience.
Yeah, and that was a big takeaway that I discussed in the last video, was just feeling rushed on time. And yeah, so, and I guess I just want to hit up on two like things that I did in my general practice the last week, because that's kind of what's not seen, right? You guys see us discussing these videos and kind of like our major takeaways, boiling it down to a few moves. But practice, right? Luke is going over those chapters, right? Rereading those chapters on pins. You know, one of the things that I did is I really struggled with time in the game, and so I started playing a lot of bullet chess just to get used to, like, okay, got to feel the pressure of time, and I got to be okay with the pressure on a 1 minute game. If I have to get all of my moves in 1 minute, I'm much more comfortable watching the timer tick away during a 15-minute game when I get an additional 10 seconds each move.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so that gave me a lot of comfort there. But then the other thing that I really started doing is dissecting. So I started playing a lot of 5-minute games and just doing some quick analyses of those afterwards and seeing where my mistakes were. And I kind of did it in reverse order. Like at the end of the game, I started looking at the end of the game where my mistakes were. And then recognizing like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I should have moved those there, and exploring what the recommendations were for, like, this is what the computer says should have been my move, but not just simply taking it as like, oh, that was the computer move, I should have done that at the end. I needed to sit down and actually understand why. Why is the computer recommending that move? Because I'm not going to hit the same board state again in a million years. Like it just won't happen. But I need to understand those fundamental chess concepts and recognizing where the error in my thinking is.
Yes. You know what? Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to move on to the next segment, but you're good.
Yeah, I totally forgot. Grandmaster game. We memorized one.
Grandmaster game. So that's our next step is Grandmaster game to go over. I will flip the board to make a little bit more sense here. I will be playing as black, so we'll see if I can do this appropriately with the board reversed.
And just for the sake of time, I'll put the details about what game and who played it and stuff, the masters, in the comments. So yeah, let's get this game underway. And you'll see how this transposed into exactly our position at one point. So here we go.
So we move to more of a Queen's Gambit decline.
Yep, so slightly different so far.
There's that move that we both talked about. Look how early it is.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where we go into more of that counter gambit position.
And here we are.
There we are. Bishop comes out because it has to. That castle gets in early.
Yep, we both have castled now.
Yep.
He's got that queenside castle this time. And now the pawn advances.
The pawn.
Again, just order of operations here, man. It's like, it's so interesting to me how this all went.
And this is an interesting one, and I think this was probably a big mistake by the person on the side playing black.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so too. I want to look it up on the chess engine here after we're done. Attacking the queen, but now I'm attacking the queen again. So now it's almost crucial to maintain that file. And of course, he wouldn't have taken it with the pawn. I want to give him double pawns there. I've been waiting for that.
You know, interestingly, you said didn't capture with the pawn. The engine actually likes the pawn capture there.
Does it now? Okay, so then that's maybe something I'm missing. Now the queens or the kings come into play as we enter the end game phase. I think that's a crucial moment because when white takes this pawn here, that's a much stronger pawn to take than the other one that was already hanging almost pretty much for me.
Black's pawn structure here is real bad.
Mm-hmm. And that was a devastating blow to it.
And you see in this next move, which I discussed with Luke earlier, this move here is just black's out of options. Black is just like, I guess move that. I can.
Yep. Now bringing the knight into the game. Temporary pin. Didn't last very long.
Yep.
But I really feel like at this point, it's what white does that really intrigues me because some of the order, I mean, I wouldn't have thought to do some of what they did.
Yeah, this seems like a really obvious attack.
And you'd think that I would go right here next, right? I mean, that's what a lot of players would do. And this right here, like Tom is saying, there's an attack. I mean, it looks obvious, but yet look at what white does instead here.
Yeah, my go-to would absolutely be moving that knight.
Mm-hmm, me too. But then check this out. And keep in mind, if he went here or if he went, I mean, there was forks with my knight coming. That's what was going on. So that was super interesting. And now this too didn't move the knight yet.
Yeah, that one's nuts because I can't take there. You would think that would be the move, but the problem is if I do the next move, that rook captures there. Skewers the king.
Skewers the king. Beautiful.
So instead, the king's got to move.
Yep. And now I'm going to move this. Which obviously, yeah, I mean, you kind of saw that coming with that was the best place for the rook probably, so.
Lose the pawn. Try to get that.
Mm-hmm, try to get the knight. But fortunately, the king doesn't have many places to go, so here comes the pawn marching up. And And at this point, the game ended with Black resigning. But the point here being all of these subtleties building up over time, and Tom and I both agree that one spot with the massive trades in the middle was a little bit of a desperate attempt, and just, yeah, not super wise. But hey, these were both master level players, and yeah, this was actually played in 2006 in Iceland. I think it was the Reykjavik Open. But yeah, super interesting, transposed into ours, so relevant to what we talked about, and super fun, man. Like memorizing these Grandmaster games, and we're always going to have this in our repertoire now. I mean, it's important to probably go over it from time to time to remember, but I'm really stoked about it, and we're just adding more to our onto our knowledge.
Absolutely, and I honestly like doing it too. Like, gives you some lines. I mean, I wouldn't suggest like, certainly don't make it your strategy to just like memorize Grandmaster games. Going to play chess.
No.
No, you need to understand why you're doing the things you're doing, because you're never going to repeat a Grandmaster game move for move.
Mm-hmm.
But being said, just this last week, the game that we memorized in one of the previous videos.
Oh yeah.
I ended up playing out the first. I was playing as black, even though I played white in our game. I played as black, and I ended up having the first same. It was like 6 moves.
That was awesome.
It was really nice because I knew every single move that I was making. I was like, I'm solid on this. I know exactly what I'm.
Yeah, that's super cool. I remember when you showed me that, I was like, oh man, that's like true knowledge right there, man. Well, that's awesome. Yeah. Did you have anything else you wanted to add to this mix?
I don't think so. I mean, keep practicing, put in the time. That's the important thing.
Yeah, and don't just focus on one type of thing. You know, if you enjoy beginnings, you enjoy openings, you enjoy mid-game tactics, you enjoy endgame, you gotta be well balanced. You gotta understand them all, and you gotta take it in stride. So, and don't beat yourself up, because it takes time and it takes practice, like Tom said. So, yeah. Well, thanks guys for joining us. Game 2 is officially complete with our analysis process. And shortly you'll be cued into a little more of the details of that process. But I hope you guys had a good time with us and continue to improve your game.
Bye.